Forge the Narrative.
Hey everybody, welcome to Forge Narrative. My name is Paul Murphy, your host for the Alabama Lost Halls podcast. This is episode 266. I'm joined tonight by Chris Morgan.
Hey guys.
Mike Brandt and Reese Robbins.
How's it going?
Hello.
Guys, thank y'all for joining me tonight.
Thanks for having us.
My life is painting orcs. It is... It's just
there must
orcs.
Be an event coming up or something.
All orcs all
I think
the
it's the foreseeable future.
Well, I do want to talk about that, why I've chosen orcs, or one of the reasons I've chosen orcs. They're awesome. You know, I really like them, and they're powerful now. But we'll later in the show, we'll kind of talk about how to choose an army for certain situations, or if you're getting into the game brand new. So I think it's going to be an interesting topic, especially with the folks that we have tonight. I'm being a little bit facetious. I felt overwhelmed by the orcs until I've broken it down. We talked a little bit about that on the last show, but I thought, man, if I could just paint 5 orcs a day, then I could be done in a month.
How's that working out for you?
It's not on track.
So you're...
I think one of the first tenets of setting a goal is making sure it's achievable.
Indeed.
Well, okay, I'm not too far off track. I mean, I'm still progressing at a pretty good pace. I think I've chosen to paint the Ludas. That's what I'm doing right now. So I've got 60 Gretchen, a War Boss, and 25 Ludas just about done. So, you know, not bad since we first started talking about it.
So a net list. I see how it is.
That's right. It's a net list. Look, that's only like 400 points.
Mm-hmm.
So I can fill it up with all kind of weird stuff later.
There's so many good options with the orcs too, and like people keep kind of focusing on like just a couple elements, but there's so many units that are viable in that book.
Yeah,
it's especially true leading into really the heart and soul of the ITC season, where the terrain actually gives you enough cover and protection for, you know, that kind of an infantry heavy army. It's going to be exciting.
It travels well. That's really, I just gave away part of the next topic or whatever. When you can put that many infantry in a carry-on, it does travel really well. I think you'll see it. But that's going to lead us into some other things for tournament prep. And while we have you guys on, I want to talk about coming up to the LVO. We're going to have a series like we talked about, the road to the LVO. I thought it'd be great, Reese, to have you on and talk a little bit about that. What's going on? What you can tell us, what people can expect. 800 people registered for just the 40k tournament?
Yeah, the champs, it keeps vacillating, of course, because people, you know, have to cancel or transfer a ticket, or they change their mind on what they want to go to or whatever. But yeah, I think we peaked at 808 registered, paid up 40k players for the 40k champs alone.
Have you adjusted the number of rounds at all?
So the way we got around the problem of once you crack 512, technically you need another round. So the way we got around it, because there's just, due to the length of how long it takes to play 40k at this point in time, trying to do 4 rounds in a day is not ideal, and we don't have a 4th day. So we decided to do kind of like a phantom qualifier round. On Saturday, the top 4 will automatically qualify for the final 8. And then places 8 through 12 will play an elimination round, and then the top 4 from those 8 will then make it on into Sunday's finals. So for those lucky or unlucky, depending on how you look at it, places 5 through 12, they will have to play a 4th round. But that's there was no avoiding it, and that's minimal impact while also maximizing the opportunity for people to make it into the finals that have an undefeated record. And it also means
those are going to be people that are focused on getting into that rank or whatever. No, that's going to be just fine.
No, it's a really innovative solution, honestly, because you know, it hits the mark on both fronts. It doesn't force all of your players to have to play a 4th day or a 4-round day, but it ensures that the people who are in your finals are all, quote, undefeated, and that you don't end up with, you know, some undefeated player sitting out and not making it to the finals, et cetera. It's a really elegant solution.
Thank you. The other benefit is that mathematically there should not be 12 undefeated players, so it means you can lose a game or tie and still have a shot at the finals, which is also, yeah.
For people that are just coming, this may be their first LVO, we're only talking about one event. You guys have multiple events, multiple game systems, and a vendor hall.
Yeah, it's going to be pretty gnarly. Like, we have over 1,200 unique 40k players coming to the event, just Warhammer 40,000. It's pretty cool to see how much it's taken off, and I think that's a testament to how much fun the game is right now.
Now you're the organizer. Mike, you run the Nova, but you're coming to be a top-tier player here at the LVO.
Well, let's wait and see if I can repeat finals before we say that. But, yeah, no, I mean, it's one of the things for me that's very nice is that there are events like this to go to. And when we first ran Nova way back in the day, a decade ago, there wasn't really this kind of a long format, elimination style sufficient runs event. And so, running Nova was kind of this weird experience where I was running the event I wanted to play in, but there wasn't an event I could go to that I wanted to play in.
That's the curse of organizers.
Yeah. And LVO is as far away from Nova as you can really get. And so it's the one that I'm most able to play in without having to worry about, sacrificing a weekend of Nova prep. So it's always really exciting to go. Plus it's in Vegas. And Beast Coast, which I'm a part of, will be there I think there's like 30 of us going and playing the GT or something crazy like that. We got to defend that ITC position.
Yeah, I gotta farm those ITC points. Chris, you're going to be a judge?
That's right. I'm volunteering to help Reese for Soul. We've been working pretty hard.
Yeah.
Did you need more judges, Reese? Is that what I'm hearing?
I think this year we're fine, but because if it keeps expanding, our core group of judges, which Chris is a part of, and thank you so much, they work all year long on the project. But I think if we have growth again next year, we're definitely going to need at least one or two more.
We'll have to arm bar Phil into volunteering instead of playing.
I'm coming. I'm going to try to infiltrate as many streams and coverage elements as I can, while also providing some of my own.
You always know. You always know if Paul's going to an event, there's a good chance he's going to get himself on TV. So
you did last year. You were on the GW stream announcing for a while. That was cool.
Yeah, it was fun. So see if I can finagle my way back on. We'll see. But I'm definitely going to be trying to provide as much coverage so people can tune in at the event. I'm sure there's going to be lots of people doing so, but I'm going to try to hang out with those folks and provide details for people that can't make it.
So are you not playing in the GT then, Paul?
I'm not. Nope.
Ah, cool.
I may bring an army. We'll see.
So I can text you for a beer if I need one?
You can.
Is that how it works?
I can beer the table. And I'll tweet about it. I need you to be close to the bar, though. You got to always play close to the bar. But last year was my first year, and it was absolutely amazing. You guys put on a great show out there, Reese.
Thank you very much. I'm glad you had fun.
No doubt it's going to be awesome this time, and it was cool to see just everyone there. It's like the spirit was high. The enthusiasm was there all around. People loved it. Continued all the way through the award ceremony. Looking forward to it.
Yeah, we're looking forward to having you. It really is just a blast. Just like Nova is, a lot of these big GTs, it's about the esprit de corps. It's like the camaraderie is what makes it special.
Yeah, pretty much was a fixture in that bar out there in the air. So, good times.
Pretty much every time I walk past it, I figured if I wasn't already with Paul, he would be there.
Oh, okay. So getting ready for it as a player. What do you do? What do you take? What are you guys' predictions on what you're going to see? Last year, I honestly thought that Chaos was going to do a lot better than it did. I thought it had answers for things like the Eldar, and obviously I was wrong. So has enough changed to where we're going to see things other than Eldar doing well?
I think so. I've been predicting orcs are the Eldar killer in all my games and in my personal experience and just theory hammering it. I feel that they have all the tools that you need to win that matchup with the kind of traditional Ynnari army that we see. I don't think it has the ability to choose through a big orc horde, and the Ludas have a lot of answers to what they bring to the table with ignoring, to hit penalties and such. Orcs are really good at winning missions. There's a lot of benefits, a lot of factors that come into play that I think if some skilled players like yourself or Stephen Pamprine or any number like Rich Kilton, I think that they could definitely be a threat with the orcs, and people haven't had enough time to prepare for them.
Yeah, Rich Kilton is definitely a threat. We had a GT up here recently, the Rudder, and we had something like 42 people, and it was kind of the first big showing for orcs in the area after the Codex drop, and Rich was right up there at the top table at the end of the GT. So I would definitely watch out for orcs, and I'd definitely watch out for what beat him in the final round, which was Guard. I think Guard are still going to do really well.
Everyone around here is super excited with the points drops, and what we're seeing is it's funny. There's an article going up on Frontline Gaming by Brandon Grant, who is kind of the wonder boy of Guard, and he predicted it, and we're already seeing it as a lot of people are going mechanized with Guard with Chimeras. And Chimeras with heavy flamers because they're so cheap now.
Really, Chimeras. I can see the mechs. I think tanks, as the things start to adjust from the recent, the big FAQ and chapter approved, tanks are going to have more of a place And especially guard tanks. I mean, the Punisher is kind of an answer to lots of things.
Yeah, 100%. They're so much more affordable. Plus, their specialized detachment, being able to slow people down and stuff, it's excellent.
That's strong. It's you have to pay for it, right? The formation, but when you do that, when you're able to slow down, if you're fighting someone maybe like a single element or something that relies on a combo punch, and you can disrupt them by halving their movement. That means you're going to get an extra round of firing with your tanks. So, or your mortar squads or whatever. So with the changes from the big FAQ and this new stuff, you've essentially bought 2 extra rounds of firing with your tanks, which makes them a lot more scary.
Yeah, I totally agree.
Does that make sense? Or do you think I'm reaching with that? I think the recent changes have brought about 2 additional rounds of firing with guard tanks.
And they didn't take any hits to their infantry costs either.
I have kind of mixed feelings about tanks still. I feel like as long as you've got the situation where, some of the more effective tanks are range limited and where the hug a vehicle rule is still real, that, you may clear your way through more rounds with them than you used to, but they are still, Tony and I play several times a month or a week sometimes, but we still get into a situation where, like Hellhounds, for instance, which we both have used in tournament play to wild success, when we play against each other, they end up being the reason we lose. Because invariably, if one of us decides to take something like a Hellhound, the other guy finds some way to hug it in a way that ruins the other guy's day. And so when you get to a certain level of play, I do still feel like vehicles are a pretty tremendous liability against pretty good players, especially when you're talking about things like orcs, and their ability to leverage the better terrain densities of LVO and other ITC type events and Nova to protect themselves from shooting and things like that. And I do think you're going to see, I think you're still going to see Eldar and Ynnari doing well, but I also think you're going to see, to the guard commentary, guard continuing to do well. We've had a lot of games here where even just lots of, sisters in guard are actually doing surprisingly well against orcs because in general they have a similar or better save for better costing. And the same combat profile, right? Because these days, whether it's Catechins or Bloody Rose, they're basically, 3 strength, 4 attacks each, right? With reroll capabilities in combat. And so it's interesting because there's lots of, I sit in on things like Beast Coast Chat and other things. There's lots of meta busting discussions going on as people try to figure out everything from, the first 4 blocking ruins rules to orcs to Ynnari to Castellans to indirect fire weapons and the cheaper cost of those for guard to the impact of Vigilus guard detachments on certain guard vehicles and units. So it's a really interesting, it's very hard, I think, to correctly predict exactly what's going to do well at LVO. And I think part of that is the density of the field, the sheer number of players means your first several rounds could be, even last year, my day 1 was fairly lightweight. My day 2 had Pamprine and Nick Rose back to back, followed by Mitch Pelham. And there were other folks who snuck into the finals that had really lightweight, final 3 rounds. And so I feel like, especially after Chapter Approved, the meta is going to be in such an interesting place. And there's such a diverse number of armies that are viable, but also have really hard counters from other viable armies that I'm really curious what the finals are going to look like. Because I feel like there's going to be 1 or 2 armies where everyone's going, how did that make it there? Maybe because they got lucky matchups or because they happened to, perfectly counter the one army that had snuck past its other counters.
Well, when you're planning to go, say you're planning to go and you're planning to do well, you're planning to take it all, and you have the flexibility about what you bring as your army, you've got to make some educated guesses about what you think the field's going to look like. How many of the X list am I going to have to fight through if I plan on winning this thing? In the past, when I'm talking about that, just to kind of frame it, is in 3rd edition, you knew you were going to have to fight past a Space Wolf or a Blood Angel player or whatever to get to the finals or in the 3rd round. So you would always kind of plan for that, or you take it. That's it. So I guess, what do you think the field is going to look like? How often do you think you're going to encounter a Ynnari or an Orc list? Or even this guard list where they were theoretically building?
That's really a good question. And I think Ynnari is going to be more common than it was last year, just based upon the fact that the increased reporting and statistics we've seen and the increased use of it in different metas from a year ago can only mean it's going to be more common. I think the Castellan is going to be less prevalent than it was at Nova, in part because of the terrain rules and in part because of just the changes to the way that their command points worked. which is like a whole nother discussion about whether the Castellan was nerfed correctly or not enough or too much or whatever.
The thing that makes me think vehicles aren't going to do well or have such a solid showing at LVO is the fact that people are kind of in the habit of expecting a Castellan. They're in the habit of bringing things that can take down a knight. So you've got to think about that as well. Now, if you take it for granted that people aren't going to bring them, you're probably going to run into that list. I still think that the Castellan is good enough that enough people are going to mix it into their soup.
There'll be a lot of them. There just won't be as many as there were at Nova. To Mike's point, like the data that we're seeing is that the usage of it has declined quite a bit, and its win percentage has gone from like an absurd 74% down to like a much more reasonable like low 60%. So it's still a winning army. It's still an above average army. It's just not the press go button that it was.
Well, you can get like 5 Lehmans for it. You can get 5 Lehmans for the cost of Castellan or something like that.
Well,
or 1 Fire Raptor.
The key there, though, is 5 Lehmans are, again, once you get past a few rounds, those become a huge liability, whereas the Castellan is never going to be a liability for you to have it. I also think there aren't going to be as many orcs that are really good players as people may think, just because it's a very expensive and difficult army, as you know yourself, Mr. 5 Orcs a Day, to bandwagon. Like, you're going to be having to buy and build and paint like 150 plus models in a couple months. That's really hard to do. So unless you have access to them or a sponsor or a supporter or a lot of money and time, there's a lot of players
your entire family to paint 1 orc a day.
Yeah.
You are a terrible.
Come on, Timmy. Get in there.
Tiny this tournament's not going to win itself.
Painting Tiny Tims.
I've been trying to teach my dog to do it. I really need to make some kids here soon.
Yeah. Oh, brother, that's funny.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to sidetrack us. I'm averaging about 2.5 orcs a day, I think, if you were to graph it out.
That's good. So you're bringing orcs to Nova. Got it. Let the world know.
Okay, so we think that there's going to be fewer Castellans, more Ynnari based off the success of that. We know that people are fans of Guard will probably see Guard, what that Guard looks like. I think Guard are strong. I really think the injection of orcs into the top tier, which I think they're solidly top tier, but the injection of orcs in the top tier widens that top tier a bit, to where, I mean, Custodes. You think that's a meta counter at all?
Yeah,
I think the Custodes are going to make a solid showing considering the changes they got in chapter approved. Again, another thing that's going to make its way mixed into the soup.
I think Mike Porter is actually talking about bringing Custodes.
That would be cool of him to do.
I mean, that's what he got a perfect battle score at LGT with him, so I would totally see why he would make that choice.
Don't remind me. The funny thing is, I have heard a lot about orcs struggle to deal with 2-up armor saves.
And knights. They do not like knights at all. Right. Sorry to interrupt you.
No, you're good. I mean, it's a perfect segue because the armies I've seen people talk about even more are, weirdly enough, Blight Lord spamming armies because of their ability to leverage hiding in ruins and their ability to bounce orcs. And also more armies that are like Guilliman and some Gallants and a Castellan and like the Loyal 32 instead of just the Castellan plus Smash Captains and stuff. Is seeing lots more of give the Knights the reroll 1 aura plus add a Primarch and have a bunch of Knights that can walk all over orcs, which struggle to the point to do much to toughness 8 Knights.
Yeah, especially with the 2-up armor save. A Gallant with a 2-up save will walk through a whole army of orcs. The only thing that stops him is that he just can't kill them fast enough. Like, they do nothing.
It's 5 turns. That's what stops him.
It's like, as a orc player, I can tell you that has.
No, I've already got that figured out, guys. It's the Relic Claw and the Relic Shock Attack gun. Yep. Pick your knights up, Holmes. Yep.
The Relic Claw will kill a knight in 1 round of combat if you roll well. Like that's the one saving grace. But then he dies in the process.
Yeah, he can't be everywhere, and he's a one shot.
He will die doing it.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, you assume that he's going to swing again when he dies, and that's when he finishes him off. But he will. I've done it many times in practice, but it's like it's a queen for a queen, but then he's got multiple queens. Yeah. So you're like, shit.
Just this week, I went up against a Gallant, a Lancer with the proper buffs and everything, and a Castellan with a Sister and Guard army, and it was very well. He boxcar exploded in the middle of my army, but besides that, it was still really, really unpleasant.
And I don't want to. I'm not just kind of guessing here. Well, I am guessing here at what the possible meta counters are to what you, because again, making an educated guess what we might see as the most prevalent. Like what what, and I don't know what the numbers are, but in a given tournament, what percentage of people play Eldar? What percentage of people play a Knight variant?
Yeah, Knights are still super prevalent in the meta. I think Inari will probably be very overrepresented because people are familiar with them at this point. So if you're coming to compete seriously, it definitely gives that some consideration. I think you're going to see
like 30% Eldar in some capacity.
No. I don't think it'll be that high.
Maybe like 8%, 10%.
Well, I mean,
Eldar,
between Dark Eldar and Eldar, Eldar.
Yeah.
Drukhari
I mean, like speaking of the differences between this LVO and last LVO, just the number of good codexes that have come out between then. I definitely expect Dark Eldar to make a very strong showing, and any mixture of their units in Inari lists, I think, is going to add a bunch extra to kind of the complicated mess that is 800 players and figuring out who's going to win.
Well, Drukhari are the top performing mono codex faction in the game by our data. So yeah, and then you've got some players like Skari, who is, I think he's still top 10 ITC. He was most of the season playing mono Dark Eldar. So I think that's, if you're going to lump all the Eldar into one group, then you'll probably see, 10-15% of the field, maybe even a little bit more than that. But Inari on their own, no, I don't think they'll be that represented.
I do think, and it always is something I feel is said, but also almost brushed off, and I never understand it, that your finalists are still going to have the names you always see in the finals, and I feel like it's easily overlooked. There's a huge difference between what are the percentages going to look like and what are the dominant armies going to be, and who are the guys that are going to really do well. And so it's really, like whatever those guys take, in my experience, is not actually all that indicative always of what the best or most prevalent armies are, because the real measure of that is how does the average player do with the various armies we're talking about versus, does Nanavati or Naden or someone or Grant still make it to the top? It's taking the tools to have a shot in the moment.
Of course, there's skill and there's a little bit of luck, and then there's a multitude of factors. But it's you need the right tools.
You do. Although I think there's a ray of hope to be seen in that if you really learn and study and practice and play the game a lot, you don't have to take to LVO or anything that, just the perfect toolkit. You just need some of the tools and to play the game a lot.
Oh, nothing gets around playtesting and being in the game.
But with that in mind, I think that it's important to note as well that how you're playing the game and what you're thinking about while you're playing the game, particularly for top table players, is going to be impacted by the code of conduct.
Oh, it can if
you really want to bring that up right now.
Well, I was going to say what I think about is smooth jazz
tools. There's an actual rule in the code of conduct that you have to indicate on the table with a marker or something when you cast a spell on something or things like that. People who aren't already in the habit of doing that are going to need to be in the habit of doing that.
Are you talking about actual physical tools? I was talking about like how many melta-guns I plan on bringing. Plasma guns and stuff.
It's a good point. The code of contact, I'm not sure if that's on Paul's agenda because that's a huge.
Well, tell you what, why don't we take a quick break? We'll have a word from our sponsors, come back, and we will talk about that for a little bit, as long as nobody minds. So let's go.
Awesome.
Not a problem.
Let's take a quick break. We'll come back.
FTN is brought to you by Discount Games Inc. Please visit them at www.discountgamesinc.com. And don't forget to ask Jay about ways to save even more on your hobby projects.
Hey everybody, we are back. Hope you enjoyed that word from our sponsors. I'd like to point out they also got some more of the Christmas holiday bundles in, so all those battle forces and stuff. So if you didn't get them through the first run, maybe check out Jay at discountgamesinc.com. He has some ready for you to get. By the time you hear this, it might make it after the holiday, but whenever, it's worth checking out.
And that's when you'll have all your gift cards, right?
Yeah. Next week is a holiday. We're still going to put out a show. Still going to be chatting. If anybody out there wants to chat 40k during that time or actually talk about anything, hit us up on Facebook or you can find me at Twitter at Warmaster_TPM. Happy to chat the whole week, whatever. I'm actually going to try to take a little bit of time off work and we'll otherwise be happy to interact. We ended off the last segment talking about the floor rules. I don't know if you guys have changed the name of them.
The code of conduct. Yeah, that's what we settled on.
Yeah.
It's
ITC Code of Conduct.
It's an unfortunate acronym, but it tells you what we're trying to do. It kind of tell you who it's aimed against as well.
Well, this is, I think, the LVO. Well, I was going to say, well, it's the largest test of these or whatever, because it's going to be a pretty large scale test of the strength of these, and I think it's important to talk about it because it's something that may impact a small number of games at the event.
I think that you just hit the nail on the head. It's like we were saying on signals, and I'd love to hear everybody else's opinion, but not as many people are talking about this as some of the other topics because it's going to impact so few people. Like, I would be willing to say 95 to 98% of the games played at the LVO, they won't even be aware of the code of conduct. They probably won't even have read it. They'll play their games. They'll have fun just like they always do. And they'll go about their day. Like, the code of conduct is there for that, 1%, 2% of games where things go off the rails and you need a clear arbitration and guidelines.
And this is available for people to look at. I think you're going to be sending the link to everyone that's registered for the events. Is that true? Or has that already happened? Okay.
It's already up on FLG, frontlinegaming.org, or it'll be up on the Las Vegas Open site in the next day. And it's already gone out in a newsletter to everybody too. So not even only the LVO attendees, like everyone in our mailing list, which is a significant number of people.
Gotcha. So what this is though, it's some guidelines, some rules, a code of conduct about how to handle some of these difficult interactions on the tabletop. This could be, I don't want to use the C word. It could be someone going as far as cheating. It can be going as so far as just having a gross misunderstanding between the two players. These are some rules on how to handle these otherwise difficult situations to where maybe the judges or the events before weren't empowered to do so. Or weren't seemingly empowered to do so.
Exactly. And no one likes to talk about punishment. We're all adults. We're playing a game. It's one of those things that no one really even wanted to do it. However, the community cried out for it, like hardcore, and then the community of ITC judges all basically came to us and we have to do something. And we were like, all right, you're right. It's time to do this.
Well, I mean, let's be real. You don't have to use them at your events if you don't want to. This is something and also let me state my personal opinion. We can get into it, but I think that things like this are good for the advancement of the competitive and quote unquote sports side of the event. Almost every single organized play thing has some type of rules that even if you've never looked at the rule book, it never ever comes up. They exist.
Yeah, you have to have it. You can't take the next step if you don't have this. And then, like we've been discussing off air, this is the collaborative effort of over 200 TOs. We took expert opinions from people from all of the American circuits, Canadian, Australian, Europe, including one of the ETC head judge, who was really helpful. Thank you, Neil. Our own judging staff, our own experience, talking to players. So it's not perfect, of course, and it probably never will be, but it's a really good starting point to establish a baseline for behavior and etiquette expectations, and then what will happen if you don't abide by them.
Yeah, and another thing about it too is that if it aligns players more towards what you would call an acceptable standard of conduct, especially long term, it is only good for the game if this ends up proving to be a funnel towards better behavior.
Yeah, 100%. And the key really, beyond the fact that we had a couple sportsmanship incidents in the last year that were high profile, beyond that, there is an apprehension among some of the people that are in the community that if they go to a tournament, they're going to encounter bad behavior, and it prohibits them from going. And we all know that that's the exception to the rule. But for someone who's never been, if this lets them go okay, I know there's a standard, and it's a standard of etiquette that makes me feel better about it, that's only going to benefit the community as a whole.
I think that what this might do is prevent a little bit of awareness to avoid some feel bad experiences. I think sometimes we walk away from a game not knowing what we didn't like about it, or whatever. But it's in the minority. This empowers folks to have that conversation well before it gets to that point. And so everybody's kind of looking out for each other, knowing that this exists.
Yeah, you said it. This is all about empowering players to know, okay, when is it appropriate for me to call a judge? It's about empowering judges to go, okay, at what point do I intervene? Is this, what is an appropriate action to take? And then it also gives the community of judges a heads up, player X has proven to be a little problematic. Maybe they got a red card, and I'm going to choose to let this person very politely know that we don't let anybody who has a recent red card come to our event. And then player X has the opportunity to reflect, hopefully, and go, well, my behavior has now had a pretty serious impact on my hobby. I need to correct course. Or not, but that's the intent at any rate.
Can I switch to a little bit of a devil's advocate now?
Please do.
What stops people from manipulating it like they would any system?
Yeah, there's nothing really. If someone's got the intent to go out and try and twist the system to their will, there's nothing that can stop them from making the choice to do that. The system itself has rules built into it that if you are trying to use the code of conduct as a tool to leverage against your opponent, you're in violation of the code of conduct, and the judge is free to red or yellow card you at their discretion. So
yellow card's a foul.
I would
right.
So a yellow card is essentially a warning. It puts you on the radar. A red card is pretty much a cheating violation. We know you cheated. We know it was deliberate, or you're continually getting yellow cards for the same thing. There's yellow cards are basically given for non-disqualifying offenses, and that's after you've received multiple verbal warnings. So you can only have 2 yellow cards during the event. If you receive a third, then you get a red card. And once you get the red card, you're out. You're disqualified. So
with no refund.
That's the severity. Yep.
Yeah.
So I might weigh in a little bit too to help on the question, because I think it's something that's intuitive to an organizer, but maybe not to the audience that sees things. And so, like Nova this year did a new timekeeping policy where we actually announced where people should be in their games, and we based clock usage upon whether or not they missed milestones that would ensure they finished games naturally within the time limit allowed. And that, in and of itself, is great, but there was one element to it that could be gamed, if not for making sure all players, especially those who are a little more irregular tournament goers or fresh tournament goers or casual, weren't made very clearly aware of what they should expect, how they should work with the system, etc. And so we made pretty regular and pretty clear and pretty aggressive in terms of making it clear to people, announcements all throughout the event, especially at the beginning, making sure people knew, and we also did it as we walked around, how they should operate. So if you've got, Joe and Jim Rockstar playing on table 1, they're going to know, even by nature, not to let their opponent use the code of conduct as a tool against them, and instead to use it as a way of understanding exactly what they can and cannot do and can and cannot get away with, and how to adjudicate it by leveraging a judge correctly. But I'm sure that, and I don't want to speak for them, I'm sure they'll tell me if I'm wrong, but, the judge team at LVO will basically be announcing quite regularly early on as well, hey, if you're new to tournaments or if you're just getting here, make sure you read the code in your packet. Make sure if you feel at all like your opponents are using it as a tool against you, to call a judge, and we can, help adjudicate that and prevent it, because the goal is for it to improve and enhance your experience, not to, be something that can be a negative for you. And so it's something that the code won't tell you, but, a judging staff that's as professional as what LVO has, is used to preparing for this sort of thing. And I expect, it's in the nature of the event to give people the information they need, so that as they're going through their day and they're not regular, that they can make sure the code is used in the way it's intended.
We put an incredible amount of thought and work into trying to make this as flexible and applicable as possible to the most worrisome situations that you come across in a game. Whether it's slow playing.
Invisible. Yeah, it's going to be invisible for most people.
Yeah, most people it won't even come up at all.
Imagine, let's think about looking at, sorry to jump in on both of you guys, but like the World Series of Poker, all of the televised hands, how often have you ever seen a conduct rule come up? It's very infrequent.
Yes.
But the fact they still have a whole list of rules, probably way longer than what's for the ITC, of things you can't and can't do. I think it's going to be invisible to 99.9% of the players.
One of the important things, just kind of address an earlier concern about players possibly take advantage of the system or gaming it. What you brought up, Paul, is just that we're on the lookout for that.
Yes,
we understood
exactly.
that writing that, and we're not looking for someone to throw out of the event. But we aren't going to let someone pull the wool over our eyes either. We want to empower players to call out the bad behaviors that we want to discourage from being a part of the competitive scene and the competitive perception, and we want to do it in a fair way, and we wanted to be empowered to do that in an official manner.
Exactly. It provides a leverage point, right? Like coming into it knowing that there could be a pretty severe penalty is going to curb behavior unto itself. Beyond that, the judges have a point, like something to point at, to say like, okay, we all came in under the agreement that we were going to abide by these rules. You're violating this rule. This is the outcome that we all knew was going to occur. Boom, bang, bing, and then it's easy. It's not. There's none of this ambiguity, no arguing.
How did this happen to me?
Yeah, exactly.
And it's not going to feel arbitrary to people.
Exactly.
No, we are given discretion, but
that's ambitious.
Discretion is based on something.
Yeah, and no one's looking. We don't want to ruin anybody's vacation. Like, trust me. Like, we have a fiduciary stake in this, and we want everyone to come, have fun, feel like they got their money's worth, and then be excited to go to the next event. So this is like it's a tool of last resort, but we will do it if it needs to be done. If someone is making everyone else's experience less pleasant, then it is our responsibility to take care of it, but to do it in a transparent and as fair as possible of a way. However, like we said, I don't anticipate give anybody a red card. Like Chris said, we're not looking to do it just to set an example. We hope it does not happen, but we will if that is what needs to be done.
I think this is an important experiment. I really do. I think this is something that we will look back on, and I think we'll be glad that this was in place. Not for any negative reasons, just the fact that this is a step forward in establishing real competitive environments for this stuff.
Yeah, to be taken seriously, you have to have this. And it was a community-driven effort. So I think it's a great starting point, and I think it's only going to make the experience more enjoyable for more people. There's these fringe discussions of someone using it as a tool. If there's someone who's trying to be like predatory with it, it's not going to take long to figure out what they're doing, and the judges are going to very, very quickly let them know that they're onto him and that he's on the short list, he or she. So I really would not.
We do have a list.
Yeah.
We're going to be keeping very close track of things. And I think the biggest testament to the success of this would be is if we never have to use it.
Exactly.
But it's better to have it and not need it than need it and not have it.
Yeah. It would be a perfect success if there was no sportsmanship issues and we didn't have to lower the hammer on anybody. That would be like flawless victory.
So to change subject, well, I guess anybody else, anything they want to add to this? I mean, I think this is going to be, it is an experiment. I was genuine when I said that, and I'm anxious to see how it all comes together.
It'll probably be underwhelming in practice, right? We'll talk about it way more than we'll actually use
it. But underwhelming
it.
Is good.
Exactly. Good. Yes, I agree.
I want to get back into talking about tournament prep. How do we win this thing? What is the path to victory? What does it look like? Or I think maybe a time to discuss some changes in the missions. Or, I mean, I know that these are new changes, but the differences from last year that may encourage certain army builds. I mean, if you have any thoughts on that.
Really, we had a fine tuning. I'll leave that to you guys because I'm a little too close to them, I think, to give the best opinion as a player coming to play in the event since I'm not, that doesn't apply to me.
Well, you see a lot of discussion about people. It's like, oh, well, this army doesn't do so well when something like an objective with the Butcher's Bill. For ITC missions, for those that haven't downloaded them, there have some baseline scoring points objectives. Kill one, hold an objective, kill more or hold more. Those are your baseline, how you're going to score your consistent points throughout the round. And then there's a series of objectives that you can choose for yourself to be able to complete, which typically revolve around you deciding what your opponent's weaknesses are. You're going to pick objectives that are easy for you to complete by either destroying your opponent's units or outmaneuvering them or whatever. Is that fair? Okay.
Yeah, that's a good description. And I think it's fair to mention, too, that a lot of inspiration from the Nova missions as well. Mike and his crew did the selectable secondaries before anybody else, and they're really fun.
And progressive objectives, which yours truly.
Well, thank you for that, because we stole from both of you.
I feel like this is a perfect segue for me to jump in. I've been invoked, but then in the newest chapter approved, you see some of these things leaking into Games Workshop, but spoken without bias, Games Workshop uses very antiquated mission concepts. And there's a reason I think that even they themselves are quite happy to use other missions in the studio and elsewhere whenever they feel like it. And it's that things like scoring objectives by the turn and having caps on the number of points you can score for any one objective and having selectable objectives, that help you tailor your mission to your opponent if they outmatch you. Those things are all innovations in the gaming industry that we've just brought into 40K through our shared mission concepts. And
you need a certain level of complexity too for these massive events.
Yes.
Just for separation, for scoring separation.
You need to stratify the field. Yeah.
Although I would say it's very easy to say these missions are complicated. I think that's...
I wasn't using complexity as a negative term. I just meant...
And you're the worst, and I know it.
I mean, something to allow...
a little granularity.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. That's a problem that they have in Age of Sigmar, is that you basically you just win or you don't win, right? Or there's like major, minor. You need a way to stratify the field.
It's funny. You can tell how passionate we all are about missions. I think there's something about the design that's also open to a game being brought back, right? In that, in the Nova concept, even the primary, you can't score it every turn if you're maxing. You cap and you're done. And it's just as much about stopping your opponent from catching back up with a late game surge as it is about, staying ahead and keeping them down. And I think that mission concept is present in our missions. Look at the ITC secondaries. You can't just keep scoring the secondaries forever. Once you've maxed them out, you got to stop your opponent from catching back up and nullifying the advantages you got by achieving them perhaps sooner. In terms of how the missions impact things, the one thing I would observe, for me, my brain is wired around the commonality of Nova missions around the Washington, D.C. area. And so tweaking my look at armies is that killing things is a little more balanced value for ITC than they are for Nova. For Nova, the only thing you really get value for killing things because you've killed them, so they can't do stuff, which is the natural value of killing things. You also get points for some secondaries for killing things, but everything else is board control, objective control, having units in various locations, etc. ITC has all of the board control, objective control, having things in various locations. But it also gives greater value for killing because every turn, killing things and killing more things is of value, whereas at Nova, that's not of value. In terms of list design, a lot of my tweaking is, do I want to have quite as many units as I would otherwise have? Do I want to have quite as little kill and quite as much board control as I might otherwise have? And I think that's something that, if you're an ITC regular, this is an irrelevant discussion, right? Because you're used to it. If you're not, making sure you're not leaking too many kills a turn and making sure you're able to score kills a turn are two things that are very important, especially in conjunction with being aware of a set of terrain rules that make sure to protect armies from getting shot off the board. So those are all interesting considerations I think dramatically impact the meta when you're planning. Yeah,
that's where I was briefly describing that people say, I don't want to take this because it's weak against that. So I'm not going to take these mech guns because I get eaten up on Butcher's Bill.
Or just on giving up kills, generally speaking. It's something you definitely have to consider, right? Because with the ITC missions, and Mike and I talk about this stuff all the time. We're both kind of nerdy for it. I love it. We always go for making them broadly accessible and appealing. And in the aim of simplifying it without dumbing it down, we wanted really, really, really identifiable primary objectives, like stand somewhere, kill something, which is really the only two things you can do in a war game. So that's a constant, and it does have a pretty big impact on the way you design your list. You don't have to skimp out on things like mech guns or whatever. You just have to have a plan for how to protect them. And with the terrain that we have, that's a little bit easier to do, I think, because there's a lot of places to hide. So don't be scared to bring units like that. Just be mindful of how am I going to keep that as an asset for myself and denying it as a liability simultaneously. So it will be interesting to see how it changes list design.
Well, with the ability to choose your own secondaries, if you make it harder for your opponent to choose profitable ones that he can easily reap, then you have a better shot of winning that particular game.
Yes, and that's true of any system, right?
This is just a critique of specifically how to prepare for using the ITC missions at the LVO to do well. I'm not making any judgment or whatever. I'm just saying that these are things that you should consider when you are building your list if you are aiming to win more games than you lose.
Yep, that is a very good point.
So it's things like that. With these secondaries that you get to pick, your opponent is also picking them. So there's a little bit of at the table, there's a little bit of assessment, a little bit of strategy before the game even starts, because you have to pick things that you feel like you can maximize against your opponent. And they're going to be trying to do the same thing to you. If you make a misstep there, you could find yourself hemorrhaging a point or two a turn and not being able to catch up to your opponent.
Or if you choose unachievable secondaries, that is like the easiest way to lose our missions, is to pick poor secondaries that are difficult for you to score. And then you're really playing an uphill battle. So, practice makes the master, but that is like the number one. You really want to think about that part. Like, don't overthink the units that you take, because what your opponent's going to put against you is there's just such an infinite number of variables. You don't have control over it. But you do want to think about your attack plan and how you're going to get those objectives and what secondaries are going to be achievable for your army. You don't want to be winging it.
You've got a couple of what I say more basic, more standard, old school 40k objectives as well. And so if you really, when you're looking at what your opponent has and you don't feel like you can get your 12 points or whatever from them, then you need to go default to the old school. Don't be afraid to pick the vanilla objectives.
Oh, yeah. Like, recon is the most commonly taken objective for good reason, right? Like, we put that in there as like anybody, no matter what army you have, can get this objective. So you can always default to like the vanilla ones, like you said, the Napoleon ice cream of secondaries, right? Like old school recon and Mark for Death. Like, anybody can get those. So it's like, don't be afraid to just default to those if you're kind of confused looking at your opponent's list.
Now, Mike, from a player perspective, we talked that you did well, but you top aided, you had a stellar performance at the LVO, and part of that had to have been picking and choosing secondary objectives. So do you have a strategy on that going into this event?
Yeah, so the key to choosing secondaries, in a nutshell, is trying to limit the amount that your secondaries depend upon your opponent's cooperation. The very easy thing to get into is to choose secondaries that are great if your opponent doesn't prevent you from scoring them at all. And so, there are ones like recon, there are ones, that's a perfect example, right? So, correct me if I'm wrong, so I'm doing it off the cuff. Recon is get a unit in every table quarter by the end of your turn, right? That gets you a point.
Yep.
And each round you have achieved that, you get a point.
Yes.
Right. Yep. Then there's behind enemy lines, which requires you to start your turn with a unit fully in your enemy's deployment zone, right?
Indeed.
The difference there is subtle, but vital to understanding, the core concept of what you want to try to do. You won't always be able to do this, by the way. Sometimes your opponent won't have a unit you can for sure kill on turn one. And so you certainly don't want to necessarily pick old school, because he may be able to revenge you from getting a point right off the bat. Or his warlord may be easily protected. That's 2 points you can't get. Or et cetera, et cetera. But recon, even if it costs you units to get it, is entirely within your control to get, because if you use your turn to put those units in those quarters, you get the point. Your opponent doesn't have a chance to respond to it. Whereas behind enemy lines is just one unit. But if it's in a deployment zone that's easy for your opponent to defend in that particular mission, it's like quarters. Good luck if you pick that with your opponent cooperating by not killing that unit before your turn comes around again. And so it's a subtle but really important thing with secondaries that are selectable, is that whenever possible, you want to pick secondaries that you can get no matter the cost without your opponent's cooperation being a contingency for scoring those points.
That's well said. Yeah.
Exactly correct. Yes.
How does that factor into your list building? Because you're obviously wanting to make your opponent's decisions more difficult. Or does it factor in your list building?
It should factor in. There's a limit to how much it should factor in, because you can always overthink. You can end up with this weird list that doesn't do anything, even though it doesn't give up secondaries. All of a sudden, you're not scoring secondaries and you lose anyway, and feel really weird doing it because you're getting blown apart.
Because you're running around with a bunch of 9-man units or whatever.
I have seen that. I have seen people build these weird lists, and they're like, "You can't score any secondaries," and you're like, "I killed you," and they're like, "Oh."
Yeah, don't overthink that aspect of it. I see people do that all the time. And then the guys that win, they're just playing the same list they always play.
Exactly. What you want to do is build your list. Like, build the list that is the good list, and then look at the missions and tweak it a little bit. You go, you know what? I have 4 characters. I only need 3. That's a little bit of an exaggeration in today's character-heavy world, but you get the point. Why not? And those little things are also important.
Do you need that character with the 6 wounds? Can you get by with the 4 wound variant or whatever?
Exactly. And then when your opponent is looking at it, if you only have... So when you're playing, especially the later games, if you're still in it, your opponent's armies will be harder to score points against, right? And they'll be better at denying you points. And it's a super trap game where you look at it and you're like, I can only ever score 3 there. and you miss the point that you can easily score those 3. So just take the 3, man, instead of picking that mission that is impossible to score more at. But in terms of list building, if you have that chance to make it so that your opponent can only get 3 instead of 4, and it doesn't really change your list much, do it, because the average opponent's going to look at that and go, can't get 4, and just not even consider it. And you're instantly impacting every game just by little tweaks to the already good list based upon that particular mission set.
Yeah, that is exactly correct. Sometimes it's better to pick the objective where you can only get 2 or 3, but you're really sure you can do it, than to take the long bomb and go for 4 and get none. That's the subtlety, and you need to practice.
Do you think which round of the tournament this is happening on matters? I mean, are you more risky in the beginning and a lot more conservative as the tournament progresses?
Yes.
You could be, but the way I play, I prefer to go, how do I get the most points I humanly can get if my opponent plays everything correctly? Because if your opponent plays incorrectly, you're going to win anyway. And so it's bad form and a common, so last year, I won't name names, but there's a couple opponents I played who are really good opponents who went into our games clearly confident, for whatever reason, that they would just beat me. And they got pantsed. So that attitude of where you look at the matchup or your opponent, you're like, I'll be a little riskier. It's early round. I got this. Don't do it. Play the perfect game regardless of your opponent. And it doesn't matter how good they are because you win. You just play the perfect game. That should be your goal. So optimize regardless of, in my opinion, timing or round or matchup. Just problem solve it the best way you can.
Yeah, okay. That's solid advice, and I think that's the best way to do it. Picking an objective where you can only score half the points would be too risky for me. I don't think I would want to go any lower than a maximum of 3 points.
It's not a bad strategy, but I've had matchups playing army that you play a lot, and you know that can have a little bit of foresight into the way it's going to go. In those instances, I will pick objectives that it's kind of like conceding a little bit, but I know I can get them, and then play to pick it up in other areas. Like, for example, a common strategy, if I'm playing a very low unit count army, very resilient, I'm going to assume I'm always going to win the kill more, but I'm also going to assume I'm always going to struggle with the hold more objectives. So therefore, where do I focus my attention on picking up my secondary points, right? So you want to be thinking of things like that. And again, you're going to get that intuition for it just by repetitions.
Yeah, I can see that. Do you have an example of where you would do that? Where you would, I guess, when you feel like you're overall outmatched and you want to go into point denial mode yourself? I guess a situation where I would.
A perfect example is my Eldar list. I play like a really non-conventional Footdar. I play Biel-Tan with a themed Swordwind. I take one of every aspect. And the army doesn't have the hitting power of most Eldar armies because I've got all these little 5-man aspect warrior units running around the table. So very frequently I'll go into the game assuming I'm going to lose kill more because I have a bazillion units.
Bazillion toughness 3 units.
Right, yeah. But they almost all can outflank or deep strike or, infiltrate or move super quickly or whatever the case may be. So it's a rare game. I don't outscore my opponent on objectives. I'll almost always try to go second. And I'll try to keep my guys alive as much as I can. I'll take all my secondaries as board control secondaries with the assumption that, okay, I may not be able to max it out, but I'm going to get pretty close. I'll get, 2 to 4 points in each secondary. And I'm banking my whole strategy on winning the hold more and trying my best to not concede as many units as I can. And I win way more often than I don't. And that's like sort of like a metagame strategy. I hope that illustrates my point a little bit. And it's just basically building a list to maximize within the missions without taking it to the extreme, right? And still using the units that you want to use. So I hope that illustrated the point. I feel like I might have gotten off the rails a little bit.
No, I don't think so. We're talking about the missions themselves. I mean, there's getting to the tournament. We're actually, the segment we're going to have after this is like how to choose an army if you're just getting into this kind of thing, competitive or not competitive as it is maybe against Warhammer 40k. But we're talking specifically about how to compete within the objectives. And when do you change your plan? Is an interesting topic. How do you defend yourself against people just reaping secondaries off of you as one path to victory? How to structure your army to make sure that you can always score the maximum points is another way of doing it. And then trying to play the perfect game, like Mike said. So I think it's all relevant.
It is. There's a lot of variables in play, but that's what keeps it fresh. You don't want the players to ever solve the equation, so to speak. Like, you don't want to have, the army, the game plan, because that just makes it Dolesville. So the complexity is it keeps it fun and fresh because your mind can always explore different avenues, different paths up the mountain, so to speak.
I dig it. Well, let's take a quick break. We'll come back, talk about how to get into 40K.
Sounds good.
We're sponsored by Firmaterra. With their study, lightweight and portable tables, you can make war anywhere. Please visit them at www.firmaterra.com.
Hey everybody, we are back. Still got the whole crew here tonight.
Bam.
If you're a new player and you hung out through all of that, thank you.
Well, we've people with eyes glassed over.
We've been getting a lot of questions about like, hey, how do I get started with 40K? How do I choose what army's right for me? And I thought, I know that we're veterans here, and longtime players have probably several armies, gone through this life cycle many a time. Maybe break down some points of what we think, knowing what we know now, as opposed to when we first started. How would we go about it, doing it all over again?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'll lead off if you don't mind.
Oh, no, good.
Super offended. How dare you?
Yeah, indeed. So we're in the unique position, or relatively unique position, of also having a game store, which anybody's feel free to check it out at frontlinegaming.org if they're interested. So I've taught, God knows how many people I've taught how to play the game, and I've given this exact talk like a zillion times. And the thing I always tell people is when you're getting started, just let the models draw you, right? Just look at them. Which ones look the coolest to you? And then just start there, because that's the only way you're going to continue on with the project. The number one thing, the first question, especially kids ask, is who's the best, right? And as we know, that's a difficult question to answer. In 5th edition, it was actually really easy because I would just show them Grey Knights and then we would move along. But now it's not that way, and you really can't play what you want. So the best way to get started is to let the coolness of the models and the lore draw you in, let that guide you, and start there, but start small. Start with one unit, learn how to put it together, paint it, build it, talk to people, hang out at the game store, and take it incrementally. When you've got that enthusiasm, you may want to blow, a couple $100 and get a whole army. But it's not always the best way to do it. You might have buyer's regret down the road. But now with the flexibility of the way things work, if you just sit there and look at those models, do a little bit of research on the backstory, I think most of us know which one we like right out the gates. And just go there and let your natural enthusiasm.
Well, we all have something that sparked it. Like, oh,
exactly.
Man, I need to get in there and figure out what a Terminator is. Or whatever.
Exactly. Yeah. And ride that enthusiasm, right? Don't worry too much about how good or not good it is. And unless you're like a hyper competitive person, which is totally cool, in which case, go do a little research on the internet first. But generally speaking, I've seen that most people stick to it when they just go with what they think is cool.
I think if I can take it one degree past that, and say that I think you need to like the troop choices of the army, because you're going to have more of them.
And you're going to be painting them.
Yeah, if you're going to be staring at them, that's going to be the core of most armies. Like for a battalion, think about how the detachments work. If you want a battalion's a strong detachment, you're probably going to want to field that, and so you need 3 troop choices.
That's
and so if you hate
point.
the way Tau Fire Wars look, you're probably not going to get as much enjoyment of playing that army as if you did like whatever troop choice is the main bulk of that army.
Good point.
And then I think you need to know that you're going to need 3 of them. And so if you don't want to paint 90 boys, or you don't want to assemble, you don't want to manage 90 boys or whatever, then orcs probably aren't the army for you, no matter how cool you think the elite choices are.
That's a very good point.
I always take like kind of a middle ground approach to this, because my experience has been that if you choose the army you most like at first glance, but it's quote not good, and you lose a lot with it, that can be demotivating, because you jump into this hobby and it costs a lot of money no matter what you start with, and it doesn't do well, and you're like, what? I gotta buy more stuff. I gotta buy something altogether different to do well. So the first things first is what's most important to you. Like if you look at the hobby and you're like, wouldn't it be cool to paint some really cool models? The flow chart you should follow is very different from, this seems like a really cool setting. I really like the feel of it. I like games, and I'd like to play a game that's in this kind of a cool setting and it's not plugged in. I feel like that's the average person. The average person doesn't specifically go, I want to paint miniatures, nor do they go, I want to crush face in competitive gaming. They go, I like playing games. I enjoy competing. I enjoy hobby type stuff. The setting looks cool. It's like dudes fighting in these ruins, and there's monsters and titans and soldiers and tanks. This is really cool. And I could be wrong, but I think that's kind of like some derivative of that is the average. And so I try to say, before you do anything, look through the whole catalog and pick 3 factions that you think look and sound really cool. And then talk to gamers and get advice from people who play the game about which of those is the strongest and what does it cost, to Paul's point a little bit, to get into that one. And so you can kind of go, all right, so I think sisters are cool and orcs are cool. You know, I like the nuns with guns and I like all the crazy orcs. And I really think these Adeptus Custodes superhumans are really, really cool and golden and gorgeous. You go, okay, well, the sisters are middle ground competitive. The Custodes are kind of edge case competitive. The orcs are super competitive, but the orcs cost a fortune and take a lot of time to paint. The Custodes are like nothing, but they may not be the most competitive. The sisters are kind of middle ground. Like you get a lot of people, but not as many as the orcs. And so then your person getting into the hobby, you've been given just enough information to know whatever of these small subset I've picked, I'll be happy with. And now I have a financial and competitive sort of level to try and find my right-sized starting point instead of just go with your first gut or go purely competitive, because I think both of those carry with them sort of that risk of disenchantment.
That's a good point.
Maybe my tagline is start with people who don't mind you borrowing their models or proxying to learn the basics.
Yeah.
Well,
we always do
the people that you
first
play
before
with will probably have more of an effect on whether you keep playing at first than what faction you're actually buying. You know, that's what my observation has been since I've been in the hobby. So the people around you are going to make a big difference. I think that's why it's great to come into the hobby when you already know somebody who's super passionate about it and who you already can know and kind of trust. Now, I think choosing the game group is probably a different discussion. You know, so far as my take on this particular topic, I'm pretty well known for being super devoted to my faction. Is that a fair assessment?
Just a little bit.
Is that the thing that has kept me in the game? Because I think it's also fair to say that it hasn't always been the best.
Also true.
In game, and I'm happy to have had the success that I've had with it. But it has been tough at times to just pick up models off the table and feel like you're not doing something with them.
Almost every faction goes through lean times, whether that be circumstance, addition changes, or whatever. It's some of the nature of the game.
So I would recommend as well making sure that there's something about the faction that you choose, whether it's the hook or the appeal or whatever, that you can easily connect with, that you can hold on to when times are tough. And it's for me it was the story, the lore and the inherent nobility and the cool storytelling, the heroism of these fictional spacemen that hooked me into that faction and made me feel like, you know what, there's nothing, playing something else right now that might be better does not sound as fun. And I tried a couple different things, especially when times were tough, and I always kept coming back to what I really liked about it. And, so find a story. There's tons of Facebook groups out there, and I get this question quite a bit personally as well. When people are sending me messages like, hey, why should I play Blood Angels? Or why should I do this? And my knowledge of the lore is part of why I write lore-themed articles for you, Reese, is, there are just topics and hooks that people get really interested in. Find that thing and focus on it and find a way to have fun with it, even if, say, you need a break for a week from going to the game store.
That's a really good point, because the story and the community around the game is what keeps you interested. Because the mechanics of the game, they're good, but they haven't always been great. And the models have become amazing, but they haven't always been the best. So I really think that is important, is finding the cool factor that keeps you going, especially if you're a devoted player like you are, Chris, or if you're have ADD like me and I have like 13 or 14 armies. But it's always like there's always a hook to it, like you mentioned. Like with my Eldar, I only wanted to use like aspect warriors and foot stuff. So I have like a self-imposed restriction that I play within that makes it way more fun for me, or something like that. Like it can take any kind of a form, but it definitely helps to keep you motivated.
We talk about this at some length on past shows, but I think it's worth mentioning right now, is that the time that we invest in the hobby, the playing is probably second or third if we were to rank our time. existing with the models, putting them together, painting them, reading about them, or whatever is probably the largest chunk of time we actually spend. And so I think if you're getting into it and you don't have the motivation, or you're going to need the string of motivation to get you actually on the tabletop the first time, that's where your focus should probably lie in the very beginning. I mean, to all your points which you all just made.
Everybody made great points. I think that's all really, really good strategies for getting into the hobby.
And you'll know what you like before you go in, I think. If you're a new player, you'll know whether you're somebody who needs a hook, needs a story element to catch onto, needs an ideal to follow, or whether you want to be more of game focused and you enjoy the challenge of finding combos, delivering strategies, things like that. And you'll know if you're just in for the cool stuff too. I think that those things aren't decided after you buy your first models. I think they're decided before. I think the regret comes in how deep you step into it.
Well, you can go even further than that and have an honest conversation about yourself. What do I want out of this entertainment, this diversion? What am I trying to get out of it? Am I trying to be the number one player in the universe and I want to crush everybody's faces? Do I want to have some good times with my buddies? Do I want to try to connect with my teenage son or whatever? I don't know what your goal is, but if you are really on the fence and trying to decide what's best for you, having this type of dialogue, I think is very important.
Absolutely. You'll get more out of it, just like anything, by putting a little bit of forethought into it.
But I think the coolness of whatever models, that should almost be your primary driving factor. Like, oh, I really want to play with these witches or whatever.
Yeah, totally. In the beginning, because there's so much to learn, and like Mike's plan was brilliant. Like doing a little bit of research and narrowing it down. That'll help.
There's books, Black Library, the wikis out there. Yeah. Talking to a buddy. There's an infinite number of resources out there that didn't exist. I don't think when we started. We had a hardback that somebody had in their backseat of their car from first edition or whatever.
Yeah. And in the beginning, while you're uploading and you're getting over the learning curve, the coolness is what's going to keep you there. And like Chris said too, it's just the gang of people that you're playing with, which that definitely bears a little effort too. Maybe if you're lucky enough to have multiple game stores, cruise around, hang out on game night and see which one suits your personality, and then start to join, be a part of the community. Because the coolest thing about what we do is that usually they're very open and accepting and friendly people.
And you can also come out of the other way. How much do you want to spend? How much do you want to spend to be able to hang out with the rest of your friends that are playing 40K on the 40K night?
Yep.
And if that's a driving factor, which is 100% acceptable.
Yeah, it's true.
That's going to tailor which armies that you want. I mean, Custodes and Grey Knights are low model count armies.
They're also relatively easy to paint if you want them to be.
Very true. And you can get them on the table. I mean, because then the assembly time is lower because you have fewer models. The paint time is probably lower depending on, let's just say, Agrex, Earthshade, and Null will go a long way.
Indeed.
And you can get, I mean, so these are all things I think to have that honest conversation with yourself about what you're getting in for. If there's not something that you're just absolutely that you're not going to be happy if you're not playing with that, because that's fine too. If you know you're not going to be happy with it if you're not playing Tyranids, then play nothing but Tyranids and let that be your guide.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think this is a cool talk to have because I think in the very beginning, for me, the thing that hooked me on the game was seeing a Dreadnought. It wasn't even the angry washing machine Dreadnought. This was the original incarnation, was like a cylinder of metal with some spindly bits coming off of it. Like a lump. I mean, you know what I'm talking about? Like the lump or whatever. It just had these little, it looked like a Killacan. I think it's probably the best way to put it.
With like a comical face on it. He's like, rawr.
Yeah, not even the cool Killacan we have now.
Yeah.
But then I didn't even, as soon as I did a little bit of research, I'm like, oh, junk, this game has space elves. I'm in.
Yeah.
I'm in that. And then it was Blood Angels from then on. Because then the same thing like Chris is talking
about.
I love
it was orcs.
That lore of, but see, back then, even when you were playing other armies, people knew you as this type. You're the Blood Angel player. You're the Eldar player. You know, now it's a little bit the areas. It's a little bit more murky with the flow of the game or whatever. But back then, when you got a codex once every 3 years or something like that.
Well, it was cause of celebration.
Yeah.
I remember
many people floating around.
For the 5th edition Blood Angel Codex, when it came out, I remember I grabbed it on my way to a job interview, and I read it until I had to get out of my car to go inside, and then picked it right up and stayed in that parking lot reading it until until I was done.
Yeah, nobody in my gaming group was originally was playing Eldar either. That was another thing. That was another driving factor. It's like, I'm going to be the guy I'm going to add variety to our gaming group. We had like 3 Tyranid players, 2 or 3 Chaos players, and a Marine player. Nobody was playing Eldar. I'm like, oh, let me get in, from this, and I'll add some variety. I mean, there's all kind of things that can influence your decision, and I think you should pay attention and absorb all of that when you're getting into the game right now, because of all the things, the investment, the time, the money, and then just the management of the figures that you own after you take the plunge.
And you should definitely do it, because it's awesome. I think all of us have been doing it I've been over 20 years now.
Yeah.
Yep. Same here.
You know what I mean? So it's like, and one of the things I always do is when a parent brings a kid into the store, and they're like, they always get a little bit of sticker shock, and I'm used to it. And they're like, wow, this is really expensive for one of these boxes. And I'm like, it is. No, there's no reason to sugarcoat it. But then I pull out my Dark Angels Captain that I got when I was like 14 or whatever.
Yeah, is it the sword in the ground and the two?
The fin, the feathered wings on his helmet.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, I bought this over 20 years ago, and I still use it today. Like, show me any other thing you've ever bought for your child that will get that kind of return on investment. And any game store owners out there, trust me, that works. And but it's also, it works because it's true, right? Like, that figure that I bought for $5 over 20 years ago, I still have it. I still interact with it. I at least look at it on a daily basis, and I still use it in games. Like, it really is an investment more than, it's not like buying a video game where in 6 months you won't even touch it again in most instances. So that really does put it in perspective, right? When you look at it from those terms.
Yeah, I like that. I think that if they made it this far, they're obviously interested in the game.
Yeah,
and it's worth it. It's worthwhile.
Don't be too intimidated by it, is what I was trying to communicate. Like, it is worth the investment as long as you don't go like spend your rent money on it or something.
Well, I mean, I think you've got to decide what you want to get out of it. And I mean, there are people that are perfectly fine they don't care about what is the leanest, meanest list.
Right.
Like, that's
most people.
Yeah. I mean, that's secondary or tertiary. I mean, granted, don't get me wrong. When you're playing a game, it's like playing Monopoly. You want to be the guy that lands on Boardwalk. You want to win. Like, there's no shame in that at all. And that's fine. But you can define, this is one of those games where you really can define what your own success is, with the hobby, I think.
Yeah.
And if you want to get better at playing, you get better at playing. You want to get better at painting, you get better at painting. If you just simply want to own 1,000 points of guard or whatever to break out 2 times a year with your college buddy, that's success too. And there's many avenues.
It's a very good way to put it.
Well, guys, that's really all I want to talk about today. Anybody else got anything they want to cover before we wrap this up? I think we're going to continue to talk with Mike as he prepares to play in the LVO.
Oh, yeah.
Reese, I hope we can have you on again really soon.
Indeed. Thank you very much for having me, buddy. It's always a pleasure.
I would be remiss if I didn't bring up what's been really exciting me this week. It's not one but 2 Blood Angel themed things, such as the animated series coming out, which is like a first for a GW in a series, right? And it's done by the same guy who did the Hell's Reach stuff. Did any of you guys see the Hell's Reach?
It's awesome.
Yeah, very absolutely great.
And then, of course, the art tease of Sanguinius versus Kabanda. Oh my gosh, guys, it's happening.
I'm hopeful.
I'm going to get my Primarch.
Yeah, we got the preview of a figure they're going to release on New Year's Day?
Is that what you think that was?
I thought it was Christmas. I thought it was Christmas Day.
Is it Christmas? Okay, well, it's coming up soon. They're going to preview the latest Forge World character, which...
Ooh.
I know what I want it to be.
I know what I want it to be, but I am really sure that it's not that.
I can promise you I'd instantly lose whatever the $100 is.
Oh, please make that bet, Paul, please.
No, I meant it would be spent immediately on the...
Yes. Well, fair enough. Fair enough. No, I'm expecting some good news come February. I'm very excited. It's a great time to be in the hobby. Like if you're going to start the hobby, this is really what an amazing time to be playing the game.
Cool figure, cool models. I mean, that's it. I mean, posing each time you just make a little story with your figure or whatever. Cool pose, interesting pose. Yeah, so much love here. Sorry, I'm kind of gushing at this point, but thank y'all for entertaining me with this discussion here.
It's okay. I'm just enjoying listening to you gush. Is that inappropriate to say? I don't know.
We'll keep it in. Well, I hope you all have happy holidays. I said I'm going to be trying to put out a show tomorrow, next week as well, even though that'll be recording on the 26th. So if anybody's available, let me know. We'll get you back on.
I actually probably am.
That's great. I know how many times are going to be tight, but I'm still going to again try to put a show out. Look forward to hearing people about what list you're building. I want to hear what people if people feel like sharing it, what they're taking to the LVO. I'll be happy to talk about it on air.
Point at the fences, baby. Do it.
Yeah,
call it out.
Call the shot. I mean, look. I mean, you might as well. There's going to be so many people there, and I mean, even if you have the hotness, the hottest tech no one's heard about, I want to hear about it. I think you're still going to be able to take advantage of it by the time the event comes around.
Yeah, we do have list submissions this year, so make sure you familiarize yourself with that. It's a new system. It's going to be really cool. Can't wait to roll it out, although it's new, so it is going to confuse some people. So make sure that you check it out, maybe even try it out a couple times once registration is up on BCP. So be familiar with that too, please.
Good night, everybody.
Cheers.
Handle the truth.